The year was 1857. Newlyweds Mariah and E. St. Julian Cox traveled by paddleboat down the Minnesota River and landed on the banks of a little borough that would soon become the town of St. Peter. Having just earned his law degree, Mr. Cox hoped to launch a political career, and Mrs. Cox longed for a peaceful location to raise a family. With its bid to become the state capital, an idyllic prairie location, St. Peter seemed like it could be a perfect new home. However, the road to prosperity was not easy for St. Peter or the Cox family. The people of St. Peter fervently hoped that their town would become the state capital. Unfortunately, these hopes ended in the hands of a wily Frenchman named Jolly Joe Roulette. Roulette was trusted to deliver St. Peter's capital bill to St. Paul, but he opted to hide out in a hotel for a week with booze, cards, and women. He arrived in St. Paul just minutes after the House of Representatives session had ended, leading to rumors of a plot to sabotage St. Peter's bid. The streets here are still surprisingly wide, a reminder of the town's crushed dreams to be the hub of Minnesota's economic and political powers. Mrs. Cox's hopes for a peaceful life were soon disrupted as strife between the Dakota Indians and the settlers of southern Minnesota erupted. The Dakota were upset because they were given paper currency instead of the gold they had been promised when they signed their land over to the government. When frustration reached its breaking point, the Dakota struck their first attack on the morning of August 18, 1862. The following week brought bloody conflict in New Ulm and Fort Ridgely. Bradley Wheelock described the terror and death that accompanied those days in a letter to his brother.
I went out with a party on Thursday and Friday to bury the dead. We found dead bodies all along the road. Some were killed while on their way to town, others at their homes and in their fields while at their work. The children were mostly tomahawked. Men and women shot, and if not killed at once, were cut in a horrible manner.
During the battle, the founder of St. Peter, Captain William Dodd, was killed as he attempted to defend the city of New Ulm. E. St. Julian, known as Captain Cox, after being commissioned into the state militia by Governor Ramsey, called for reinforcements and managed to secure the town. However, in just 8 days, hundreds of lives on both sides were lost. Chief Little Crow spoke mournfully of the conflict's impact on his people. He said,
"We are only little herds of buffalo left scattered. The great herds that once covered the prairies are no more."
The turmoil left thousands of settlers without homes or food, fleeing their rural farms to the fortified city of St. Peter. It was during this time that the Cox family proved their leadership in the face of adversity. Captain Cox was a hero on the battlefield, and Mrs. Cox was a compassionate leader on the home front. She worked closely with local women and the churches of St. Peter to provide food, blankets, and shelter for the influx of refugees. Through kindness and competence, the Cox family established themselves among the most respected citizens of the city. By the end of the period of transition, St. Peter had grown from a population of 2,000 to 10,000. Despite conflict, this little town on the prairie continued to build and grow. Farms thrived, businesses boomed, and trains chugged through. St. Peter had 2 hotels, a brewery, several general stores, blacksmith shops, and a courthouse where Captain Cox would eventually serve as district judge. As the city thrived, the Cox family did as well. Captain Cox became the first mayor of St. Peter and was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives and later the Senate before being elected as district judge. The couple that arrived on the banks of the Minnesota in 1857 with very little in their pockets, but with the hope of a new life, had become a well-established family in St. Peter. In 1871, they built a beautiful home. Step inside the Cox house to learn how the Cox family lived during a colorful time of conflict, progress, and growth.